highlight their supposed achievements in line with maybe it could be a commercial or non-commercial objective to be more famous, and then you ride on certain, I don't know, signs of the times or trends. I don't know if you're detecting where I'm going with this,
Mm.
with the intention of persuading whether those trends are based on fact or not. And sometimes it's societal norms, no? For example, nowadays, and I hate to bring it up, sometimes very ideology wise, one of the most popular ideologies are something we would call woke ideologies. So
Mm.
anything that
Mm.
promotes
Mm.
gender politics, racial politics, in some cases religious politics. So it's very, I mean, even to me it's very, very blurry, because
Mm.
to a
Mm.
certain extent some of those are based on fact, but they've been stretched beyond, you know, I don't know, thresholds of verisimilitude. Eh. Parang,
Mm.
okay, let's
Mm. Mm.
highlight it
Mm.
na to the point na it's, for example, and I hate to use this, very popular, but it's more acceptable these days to be pro women, but not pro men.
There is
Uh,
that trend, yes.
so, okay, that's one angle. The other
Mm.
angle naman, and just to make it richer, um, you mentioned AI, you mentioned social media. And these are algorithms that we're contending with, which may or may not have had any malicious intent. Let's just assume muna for the moment it was completely neutral. Let's
Mm.
say in the
Mm.
case of Facebook, the intention was to segment populations, nga, as you said, di ba? But not realizing one of the best ways to segment people is hate speech and
Mm. Mm.
disinformation.
Mm.
So the algorithms eventually found that, parang ano
Mm.
lang yan, reinforcement learning,
Yes,
and they
yes.
found now, okay, this is the best way to accomplish the goal. Therefore,
Mm.
I'm going to push these messages.
Mm.
It creates polarization. And even they, I mean, they meaning Facebook and similar platforms, are reluctant to openly admit that they are the cause of the spread of disinformation, because it feeds their business model. No? So
Mm.
on the one hand, political BS in a nutshell. In the other hand naman, it's algorithmic powered BS with a commercial intent. I don't know which one is more tractable. Or anyway, how do you appreciate both, no, in this current discussion?
Yeah, so these are very rich issues now. On the first one,
Mm.
again, let's take a trip down history. No, if I don't know if you know rather Bernays. No, Bernays invented PR. Edward Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
And in the early 20s, Edward Bernays was genius enough, genius in quotes, to come up with a campaign to convince women to smoke. Because in
Okay.
the early 20s, many women in the world had just gotten the right to vote. Because prior to that, of course, the stereotype was women stayed at home, stayed in the kitchen, stayed in the bedroom. And so they did not have a political opinion, right? But because the suffragettes fought for almost 80 years, and finally women got the vote.
Yeah.
But the British American tobacco, those who sell cigarettes said, "Oh, our market is mostly men. How do we break the taboo against smoking?" Because women being seen smoking was seen as very unsightly. You know what Bernays did? He synchronized during the New York parade. He said to the journalists, "Women will light up torches of freedom." Because remember, the most important thing to women then was to be treated as equal because they now had the vote. And so all the journalists went to the parade. And sure enough, on the appointed time, women did light something. They all lighted cigarettes all at the
Mm.
same time. So this was splashed across all of the headlines all over the US. And overnight, nearly overnight, the taboo against women
Disappeared.
smoking disappeared and a
Uh,
fresh new market was born. And this was something that was harvested by 8 major tobacco companies, right? We know that.
uh,
So
uh, uh,
what did Bernays realize? That the way we think and talk about something changes the way we view that reality. And thus PR was born. And even now we know about events, PR, endorsers, etc. Businesses still do this. And politicians do this all the time. They want to influence the discourse because it is what will sway voters. For tobacco companies, it was tobacco sales. For politicians, obviously, it's votes. Now, the question is, how does the anti-BS approach help here? Let us again apply the same principles. Anything that is said by people is just the surface. For example, you were talking about, I think, social justice thinking, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
now very prevalent in the West, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm a professor, so I might as well come out with it. Some of the most vulnerable to this are professors in the West. Many
True.
senior professors have been mobbed.
And students, pretty much.
Well, students, because they're lower in the
Hierarchies.
power hierarchy, they're really subject to this. But even professors are being unplatformed, mobbed, hit by. In fact, there's this famous assistant professor in Harvard who just lost her key position in Harvard because she dared to say that women are biologically different from men. As you know, in some quarters, this is absolutely taboo to even say.
Mm,
So
yeah.
everything we learned in biology, which is what the DNA is, that the chromosomes of men and women are different. Many will not even allow you to say that because it's seen as a very critical statement that is oppressive of certain types of people who self-identify, either as trans or LGBT, etc. So for me as an academic, I'm always opening up these discussions, and sometimes I get into hot waters for this because I'm really interested to know. Okay, if you do say that, may I know why you think so? No, because remember the third principle, right? Look for people whose opinions are as different from you as
As
possible.
possible, yeah. To be
And I do
open-minded.
that. I
Mm.
know that. So even if I'm being mobbed, I follow the person and say, "Can we have coffee? I'm really interested in what you have to say." And then after a while we discuss, then I realize why they think that way. Because either in their personal experience or in the experience of people they love, they have felt that either their gender identity or their being a woman was a means to target them by
Mm.
somebody who is more powerful. So I think I can empathize with that. But as you said, sometimes those who mean well, or maybe those who just want political power, can fan the flames of this resentment. And then
True.
everything goes to the extreme.
Mm.
This is the problem, no? So it was meant to really just give a voice to those who may have been traditionally marginalized, like the women who, after all, were given the vote so late. But then after a while, it swings to the other side and says every man now is a suspect chauvinist. Yeah. Of
Yeah,
course
true.
you'll say that because you're a man, right? So that's how to unplatform a man. Of course you say that because you're a man, right? Like I didn't choose to be a man. How can you use that as a basis to attack me, right? But in many circles, that's simply acceptable. Yeah. On the matter of AI now, on algorithmic, well, I think businesses were always clear that they wanted maximum revenue. For social media, that translated to a simple metric, which was engagement.
Tama.
Because the higher the engagement, the higher they can charge for advertising for all their clients.
Mm.
And the metrics for engagement is fairly simple, right? How long does the user stay? And as you said, they found out that the simplest way to get people to stay was to fan conflict.
Hatred.
Yeah, well, we knew that. I mean, even when I was in high school, when we were having a boring day, we would just whisper to each other and say, "Oh, look at si ganyan and si ganyan," because we
Mm.
know they hate each other's guts. So we would just plant something na, "Oh, sama ng tingin
Just
sa'yo."
just to
See?
incite some
Yeah,
some
and then we would
attacks.
have entertainment after class. Now we go to the field and then we'll watch them fight each other. So this is not even an insight. Every high school student knows this. If you're
Mm.
bored, just pagsabong mo yung mga yan. Ano?
Yeah.
So this is now done algorithmically.
Oo.
The problem there is, of course, yung polarization, yung sinasabi mo. Because first of all, for democracy to work, we all have to be critical thinkers because otherwise we're just manipulated mobs, right? But more importantly, if we now divide people so that they cannot even have a civil conversation, you are slowly breaking down society itself.
Yeah.
So yan yung unintended consequence because of the algorithmic insight which any high school student actually knows na kung gusto mong tumingin yung mga tao, di ba pagsabong mo yung mga yan. So somebody who has more conscience has to step in. And you mentioned the EU AI Act, no? The EU AI Act is explicit. Cognitive behavioral manipulation is banned. So
Mm.
all of these companies that use captology or anything that uh, nudge you towards behaviors that you're not aware of, they will be closely monitored by the EU once the law enters into full